Hi, a lot of you here. I'm Paul, I'm an alcoholic. Excuse me if I'm a little nervous. Before we get started, I got a text this afternoon right after lunch. So a good friend of mine, a coworker over in Fayetteville from when I lived over there, texted me. Her stepson died of this thing last night, so I'd just like to take a moment of silence if we could have a silent prayer for the family. I'd appreciate it. Thank you. What that tells me is, that's why I do stuff like this. I don't like to do this, right? I don't particularly like standing in front of a room of people and telling all my faults and foibles, but, I tried to help him, try to get him in treatment and stuff, and, just the willingness wasn't there, and, that's there, but for the grace of God go I, right? I got to always remember that. Anyway, so I am Paul, I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date is Christmas Eve 2017. So I spent that year Christmas Day, and 3 days afterwards in detox here in Moore County. So sober on the holidays, right? A couple of guys, and it wasn't my first rodeo. I think I went to that detox about 5 times. And that's not my first sobriety date. I played around with this thing for a lot of years before I really got willing, right? That's the key to this thing, I believe, is willingness. And I'm the kind of alcoholic, things got to get pretty bad. I got to be out of options, or else if I could figure out a way to keep drinking, if I could have figured out a way to keep drinking, I would have. I first came in these rooms to learn how to drink successfully, right? And I'm going to do it different next time, and I'd end up back in detox, and I'd put together a few months, or, and I'd get some time, and then the job would come back, the money would come back, maybe the girl comes back, the family's not so pissed at me. Maybe I'm all right, I can drink again, right? And that went on for a better part of a decade, right? And but here's the thing, is that I used to have, I'd get these good periods, but they kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and the consequences kept getting worse and worse and worse, health-wise, career-wise, relationship-wise. So, when I went to treatment in 16 for the first time here, that's not my first rodeo. I weighed 155 pounds, okay? I'm 6 foot tall. I weigh 193 today, so, I was pretty sick. Couldn't lay on my right side because my liver, couldn't lay on my left side because my pancreas, or whatever way it is, but, I was a pretty sick individual. My skin was gray, malnourished, because I just don't eat. When I'm drinking, I get all my calories out of the bottle. I might eat one, and, I'll get to it later, but I cooked professionally and have for 40 years, and I start drinking and cooking something real good in the house and everything. The next thing I know, I wake up from a blackout and food's still, I never ate none of it, right? Craziness. So I'm supposed to tell you what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So I was born in Western New York in a place called Olean. It's kind of south of Buffalo, and but we left there when I was an infant. My dad's a mechanical engineer. My mom's a registered nurse. Now, heredity plays a role in it for me, I believe. 3 out of 4 of my grandparents were alcoholic, but neither of my parents were, or at least not active anyway. My mom, she might have some isms, but she never was a drinker, right? And I was born from an early age that I had this gene, right? My mom, she's a medical person, she understood it, and she said, you better be careful, your grandfather and your grandmother, yeah, whatever, My grandmother, I come to find out later, once I was sober, I was going through a storage unit long after she died, after my father died, and I found all her old AA books and pamphlets and stuff, and had her, her sobriety date in there, which was 1972. So, I never saw her drunk, I did see my grandfather drunk, or I saw him drink. I didn't realize the alcoholic he was until I came to this program, because I didn't recognize the behaviors as a child, right? I just thought, people drank, because other people in my family drank. And my grandfather never had consequences. He's a successful businessman, wealthy, he did well for himself. But I remember 2 episodes that I know today are the behaviors of an alcoholic. One time when I was 8, 9, he sent me to get him a beer. He drank Budweiser out of a can. And he said, go get me a beer, Paul. I said, okay. And I went to get it, and I was in the family room where the refrigerator his beers were, and I started playing with something, and I forgot about it. And he came in and just gave me my grandfather never laid a finger on me my whole life except this one time, and he kicked me right in the ass. I know today that like normal people don't do that. Like, that beer was that important that he kicked his grandson in the butt. And it didn't, my feelings weren't hurt that much by it even at the time. Like, oh, I screwed up. I should have got Grandpa's beer. I look back at it in hindsight and I'm like, damn, like that ain't normal, right? That's what I might do. And then one other time I came over to my grandparents' house and nobody was around and he didn't know I came in and I saw him standing in that same family room and he had a bottle of Canadian Club tipped up like this, right? And well, whatever, I didn't recognize that either, but normal people don't drink like that. I drink like that, for sure. The glass went away for me a long time ago. Like, for me, it got to pop off with a Gatorade chaser to keep my electrolytes on the car. That was my plan anyway. So anyway, we moved to Texas when I was very young, and I had a good childhood. My parents were both professional. We made good livings. We lived in a nice neighborhood. This was late '60s, early '70s, and it was like the Wonder Years neighborhood. If you ever saw a TV show, all the houses and the kids all playing together, and it was good. I had a good childhood. And then when I was about 5, my brother came along, and then we moved to New York, the Hudson Valley, which is where my mom is from. Her family, or her parents, had a long-term care facility there, and she went back to kind of take over the family business and run this health center. So that's when things got weird for me. So, I believe that I had alcoholic tendencies, or I had the isms long before I ever took a drink, right? And when we came to New York, I learned to speak in Texas, in Houston, Texas. So I spoke like a Texan, right? And in 1973 or whatever it was, 74 in New York, in the little town of New Paltz, which is kind of like a hippie little college town in the Hudson Valley, like all the kids I'm in second, third grade, they've all got long hair and tie-dye and all this stuff. And here I'm like a crew cut with a southern accent. Things did not go well for me for a while. Like, you know what I mean? And it was the first time that I experienced that feeling that I think most alcoholics have, where you don't fit in and you feel like an outsider, and I was just generally uncomfortable. A friend of mine likes to call it, I felt at dis-ease, right? Disease and dis-ease, right? And I was just uncomfortable all the time. Eventually I made friends and stuff, and, I also recognize now about my childhood, when I say I had the isms, like, I didn't know it at the time, but I know it today. Like, I was always self-centered, I was always selfish, I was always manipulative. Like, I want stuff, I want it now, I want my way. And when I don't have those things, I'm irritable, restless, and discontent, like the book tells us, right? I was that little kid, mommy, let me have this toy, let me have this. And my parents didn't spoil me terribly, but, I grew up getting I got everything I needed and most of what I wanted, if I'm honest about it, right? And that attitude would carry on into adulthood. People say you stop growing when you take your first drink. I don't know. I don't think I'm still growing up, right? Because I still have isms, right? I don't have a drink in me today, but I still got those isms if I don't work this program. So moved to New York. I made a little group of friends and everything, and drinking for me. I remember my first drink. I was 14, and it was at a company Christmas party, and so some of the employees thought it would be a good idea to get the boss's son drunk, and they started feeding me, I don't know, highballs or something. And I know some people say, like, their first drink, I got that feeling and everything was great. Not me, man. I got sick. God, I got sick. I didn't enjoy it one bit. And I don't know that I said I'm never going to do that again, but certainly I did it again. But it wasn't a good experience. What I know, I recognized the first time that the drink became a solution for me, right? Because that's what alcohol was for me for the longest time. Like, alcohol wasn't my problem. All that other stuff was my problem. Alcohol was my solution, right? Because it got all that fear and all that insecurity and whatever. Everything was okay, man. It was all over a girl, like in high school, right? I got dumped right before the prom, and my life is, I'm a teenager. My life is over, and somehow I got my hands on a bottle of Southern Comfort. And I never drank Southern Comfort again after that. But I pretty much drank the whole bottle. And like, if you've never got drunk, it's, oh, God. But at that time, I recognized, like, after I got partway through that bottle, everything was okay. I felt okay. And that became, like, my solution after that. Now, my drinking didn't become consequential until later in life, you know. But, you know, guys I hung out with in high school, this is the Hudson Valley, you know, people hear New York and they think the city. Well, this is upstate, like, we're pretty much country. It's kind of like growing up here, like we're fishing and hunting and like we're country kids, really. It's college town, so we got some hip stuff going on, but pretty much we're hanging out in the woods. So you know, we smoke some stuff and drink some beers, and you know, it's just kind of normal stuff. And then somewhere around in my 20s, I started hitting the hard stuff. And you know, when your drinking buddies start telling you you're hitting the bottle too hard, maybe you should listen to them. But like my drinking buddies, like, Paul, man, you know, because here's what I started doing. Like, I'm pregame, right? We're going to get together and do whatever, a poker game, or and I'm like drinking vodka before we go, right? And then when everybody else is done, I'm still drinking. Like, I'm always the first one to start and the last one to finish. And so they're telling me, and you know, maybe you better knock it out, you know, knock that off a little bit. And I'm just not going to let you know I'm doing it, you know. And it went on like that for a while. And when I say, you know, that was nothing compared to what it would graduate to, right? Like, if I would buy a fifth, it would last me 3 days, right? By the end of it, a fifth don't make it till noon, you know? So anyway, during all this, I'm not really having consequences, you know, and I went to college. I went to community college for criminal justice, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I transferred to Utica College upstate, and that was great. Boy, it put me in a dorm, and that, like everybody is doing, like, so needless to say, I failed out of there pretty quick, right? And I pretty much came to the realization at that point, between the stuff I was drinking and smoking, that law enforcement was probably not the career choice for a guy like me. And so all through high school, and I'd always worked in kitchens. You know, I'd worked in the kitchen, my family business. I'd worked in a few restaurants, and so where I grew up in New York, the Culinary Institute of America is right across the river in Hyde Park. So I decided that would be a good thing for me to do. You know, I always enjoyed working in the kitchen, and so that's what I did, and I did really well. You know, I graduated with high honors, second in my class, but by this time I'm already a daily drinker for sure. Like I get home and I got my book work that I got to do, and you know, culinary school is different than regular college. It's not like you go for a few hours. Like it's an 8-hour work day pretty much at that school, and then you have homework on top of it. And so my way of doing homework was I had my little apartment. I'd sit at the kitchen table with my bottle of vodka, you know, and do my homework and whatever. And I did well in culinary school, and I got out of culinary school, and they had a job fair, and it was the corporate chef for Club Corp had a booth up there. That's how I ended up in North Carolina. Was Club Corp kind of recruited me to come work at the hotel, and I came down here. So, well, I should back up. Right before I came down here, I used to go out. You know, I went to the bars on the weekends. And I was driving back from the bar. New York, the bars close at 4 a.m. So I was driving back from the bar at like 4:15. It's only a couple miles to my house in this little town. And I rolled my truck into a ditch on the side, or the truck on the side of the ditch. And not like a violent accident. I was in a blackout. I was going so slow, I think I just kind of like rolled into the ditch. But regardless, my truck's on side. I'm hanging there in a seatbelt. And I said, well, hell, I'm screwed, you know? And in those days, I was drinking 7 and 7. So there's no way there's not a smell of whiskey on me. So I undid the seatbelt and fell to the other side of the truck, and then I climbed out the window, and I'm standing there on the side of the road, and I was working in the kitchen at that time, and the bread delivery guy comes by. He's starting his work day, right? I'm finishing my day. He's starting his, and he's like, "Paul, man, you all right?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think I'm screwed, you know?" And the cop rolled up, and here's the thing about a small town in New York in the early 90s. Like, look at my license, recognize the name, like, "You're gonna need a tow truck?" I said, "Yeah, probably." And then they got my truck upright. He said, "Are you all right to get this home?" And I mean, I'm wasted, obviously. And I said, "Yeah." And he followed me to my house, and I parked my truck there with the grass and stuff hanging out of the bumper, and no consequences, right? I often wonder in hindsight, like if I'd had consequences then, would things have been different? But I don't think so, because the consequences would get way worse than that, and it still didn't stop me. So anyway, I come down here to work, and I was here 2 weeks. And by this time, like, I just wanted to get out of New York. The economy up there was crappy, and it was just my degree carried more. There was a lot of CIA degrees around New York. There wasn't too many down here. Like, I was guaranteed a decent job down here. And I had a free place to live down here because my parents had built a retirement house on number 6. So I could just stay in the basement of that place and just make money and not. So I was here 2 weeks and I decided I need to go out and see what the nightlife is like in Southern Pines. Well, this was 1996, it wasn't much, right? And so I asked somebody to work, where you guys go? And they said, well, you need to go to Fat Puppies. And that's where Smithfield is now. Those guys have been around a while. And so I went down there, and of course I pre-gamed before I even went, because I don't want to spend the money in the bar. And I made it, I saw New York plates on my little Toyota truck. I made it like, I don't know, 50 yards out of that parking lot, and I got pulled over by the state troopers. And I ended up in Carthage in the old jail. And what it turned out was, and I didn't know anything about this at the time, it was race weekend. Right, in Rockingham still had the race. So that jail was full of drunks like me. Full. I had a mat on the floor. Like, well, this is, and I actually have some family down here. I had some family out in Lakeview. I didn't say, my maternal grandfather was from Lakeview originally. There were tobacco farmers out there. But anyway, I wasn't calling them. And I just started the job 2 weeks. I picked up my whole life from New York to move down here. I can't lose the job, so I didn't call any. So they would have let me go. I was cooperative. The cop was, and I blew it a .28. Like, it's not like it was close, But I remember the magistrate said, how was Mr. Jarrett? Was it cooperative? And the trooper's like, I wish everybody was as cooperative. Like, we talked about fishing. I sat in the front seat, cuffed in front. Like, I don't argue with cops. You got me, right? And she's like, well, you can go home if you have somebody pick you up. And I said, I ain't calling nobody, So I spent 16 hours in the lockup, and that's the only time I ever went to jail. I deserved to have been in jail. I deserved to be in prison for the amount of drinking and driving I did, if I'm honest. But I got out, and I got a cab to go back home, and I said to the cabbie, I guess I got to get a lawyer. Who should I get? And so he turned me on to Eddie Meacham, And long story short, I don't need to keep talking. I don't want to stay too drunk too long. But anyway, I got out of that DWI eventually. Like, I got a prayer for judgment. Another, again, escaping consequences, right? And I wonder again if it had, he kept putting it off, and I was going to the classes at Daymark and doing all the bullshit so I could, get a conditional license. And when they let me off, I stopped going, and a lady called me up, you're not going to get your license back if you don't come to these classes. And I'm like, I got it back later, And so I've never been, at this point, I've never been to AA. I know what it is, but I know I'm an alcoholic. Like, there's no question in my mind that I'm an alcoholic, and I didn't know the steps yet. And this is the problem. Like, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. I knew that a long time ago. I knew that when I was still in New York. That unmanageability part, that one I couldn't get down with. And I really didn't get down with it until 2017, if I'm honest, right? Because here's what happens. I seem to have this tendency to fail up, right? So I'm drinking every night still, and I'm working at the hotel, and I'm getting promoted, right? I come in there as a line cook, and then they got me running the bake shop, and then next thing I'm sous chef. I'm running the Carolina dining room. Like, yeah, I'm fine, right? Doesn't matter. I'm drinking half a fifth every night, right? Like, pretty much drinking the blackout every night. I don't remember going to bed at night. But I get up and I go to work. I don't miss work. I pay my bills. I got a car. I have a license. I don't have consequences. Everything's great. I take a little vacation and I go over to Hawaii, and I meet a girl out there, a little local girl, and she ends up coming back to Pinehurst with me, and she works at the hotel too, and then she works at the Holiday Inn, and then she decided to go back to go finish college, and she's quite a few years younger than me, and so she goes back to go to UH, and I see a job posting come up that Club Corps has a chef's job in Honolulu, right? So I'm like, well, I'm going to go to Hawaii and hang out with her, So I put in for that job and got it, right? And I get over there, and and I've kind of tricked her. Like, when she came over, she told me one time later on, years later, like, you tricked me, because what I did was I kind of cut down on my drinking a little bit, and I started hiding it a little better. And when a relationship is new, you kind of on your best behavior, but then my true colors eventually are going to come out, and that there's a hostage, and there have been other hostages in the past, But this is a relationship that lasted for many years, or 6, 7 years anyway. So she went back to Hawaii. I followed her out there and got this good job, and my drinking's escalating out there. And now I wasn't abusive or anything, but I don't come home after work. I go to the bar, right? And when I do come home, I might trip and break some furniture, right? And so, it starts with, she finds my stash of liquor in the bathroom, like I was hiding in the ceiling tiles and like dumping it out, stuff like, I just gotta, my solution is to adapt. I'm just gonna hide it better, right? And that would continue for years too, right? I don't think any of this is strange behavior for an alcoholic, really. I never did the toilet tank because I'd read about that somewhere. I figured somebody would find that right away. The ceiling tile seemed like a better idea to me. And so she graduates college, and she decides she wants to come back to Pinehurst and work at the hotel. Now she has her degree in tourism or whatever it was, and she wants to, because people that grow up on the islands kind of want to get out of there, For me, it was an exotic place to be for 2 years. So long story short, she comes back here. I'm still there, right? Like, now I recognize, she's trying to get the hell away from me, right? Here's a sickness in a relationship. Talk about codependency. I'm an inattentive, miserable alcoholic, but she don't want to really break up, but she don't really want to live with me either. And I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll come in a few months or whatever. And that's what I did. I transferred back to the hotel. I called them up and said, you need anybody? I said, yeah. And they paid to move me back there, and then they had to pay me Hawaii wages in Pinehurst. I was great, because Honolulu pays a lot better than Pinehurst. And I came back, and then, my drinking escalates, and I get another DUI, and I didn't get out of this one. So Shannon, she decides she gets a job with Marriott in D.C. She'd run away again, right? I follow her up there. I get a job in D.C. at a nice seafood restaurant. I move up there, and my drinking it's still ramping up, But like I said, I'm failing up. Now, it's a better job than I had here, way better job. I'm working blocks from the White House in this fancy restaurant. I got the president comes in and eats, good stuff, right? But I am 3 sheets to the wind every night. I'm literally, I remember that last Christmas we were together, I came home and tore down the Christmas tree. Not out of anger or on purpose, I just fell down into the Christmas tree, and that's how I was. And long story short, she finally had enough. And to be honest, I didn't even care at that point, because now I could do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, how I wanted to do, whatever. I just didn't care, and still no real consequences. That DUI, I just left it here. Pleaded guilty and left it. I didn't need a car and license in D.C. anyway. I rode the metro from Northern Virginia to work every day. I didn't care. No, and that was great. I could drink up, get on the train, take a cab, go wherever. City life's great if you're an alcoholic. And she laughed, and I boo-hooed a little bit, but in reality, I just went on doing what I'm doing. And I never missed work, but I would now I get those mornings where, boy, the shakes are on me, But it wouldn't last. They get off me, and I failed up again. So they gave me this job. They were building another restaurant in Baltimore, and they said, well, that's going to be your restaurant, but in the meantime, we're opening one in Atlanta, we're opening one in San Diego, these other places. So they started having me travel. So they'd send me to open a restaurant here, open a restaurant there, with the staff and get it up and running. And I don't know about you, but traveling for me is now I can go hog wild, right? And it's not really my restaurant, so I'm not really responsible. I'm the kind of guy, when I go on trips, I would research where the liquor stores are, where the bars are, this is how alcohol consumed my life. I was a slave to it. I don't make a move or a plan to do anything without making sure my supply will be uninterrupted from the time I leave, time I get to the airport, to the time I get to the hotel, to whatever. And, just craziness. Then I opened the restaurant in Baltimore, and, things are getting worse. And, when you're a partner in a corporation like that, you sign contracts and things, right? And there's a thing, I had a non-fraternization clause in my contract. So I lost that job not for drink. Well, I lost it for drinking, because drinking affects my behavior, right? Drinking affects my decision making. I do stupid things, even when I'm sober, but in alcoholism. And I lost that job, and it was the best job I ever had. I was making a lot of money. I had a brand new row house in a good neighborhood on the Inner Harbor. I'm doing TV shows, it was good stuff, And then all of a sudden it's just gone, all of it. And this is when I was like, my family, my family's like, at this point, my family's intervening, or something, like, I'm a mess. This is when morning drinking started. Like, I remember I got up one morning and I just couldn't keep the razor still. I just couldn't. I couldn't. And in Baltimore, I could go down to the corner of the bodega and get vodka at 6 in the morning, and that's what I was doing. So I am drinking on the job. I never drank on the job until this point. Now I am. I have to. I don't have a choice anymore. It's physically dependent. I'm sick if I don't drink. And so, I lost that job. And if it hadn't been for the indiscretions with waitresses or whatever, I would have lost the job anyway. I was almost relieved when they fired me, So my family and friends finally convinced me, like, you need to get help. And so I went to, this is the first time I got some treatment, right? And I went to Father Martin's Ashley, which is up in Havre de Grace, about an hour and a half so in Maryland. And they sent me up there, and and it was good treatment, whatever, 28 days. But the whole time I was there, like, I look back on it, I wasn't really trying to get sober. I still had that attitude. Like, I didn't think the idea of not drinking when I got out, let alone not drinking forever, seemed like craziness to me. And I did what I was supposed to do when I was there and whatever, but really the whole time what I was thinking about was, well, how am I going to get a job? How am I going to get my career back online? And how, like, I had this idea, how am I going to get back to whatever it is I thought I had, right? I know today, like, that's the wrong attitude. It doesn't tell me that in the promises, right? It doesn't tell me I'm getting shit back. Nowhere does it say that, right? And even when I saw the promises, like, I still read them like that's what it was telling me, but it's not what it tells me, right? It doesn't say, it says I'm going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. It doesn't say anything about what I had before. Hell, what I had before is what screwed me up in the first place. If what I had before was so great, why am I in this situation, right? That's what I should have said, but it's not what I said. So I got out of treatment. I went to some meetings. I stayed sober for a little while, right? And basically, me finding work in Baltimore at that point was difficult because my reputation is pretty soiled, I was at a pretty high-end restaurant, and I was known, and it was known what happened, right? So I'm thinking, what are my options? What are my options, And I said, you know where they don't know about this? North Carolina, And so I made some calls. I ended up getting on with a sous chef position with a very nice country club down here. I won't mention the name, and I held it together for a while. I had another one of those good periods, right? I'm not back to morning drinking. I'm not falling down drunk all the time, but I'm drinking again every night. That's what I do. I'm an alcoholic, and start failing up again, right? Next thing I know, I'm executive chef of this place, right? But and I'm not drinking on the job. Like, things are going well. I'm making good money again, real good money again. Bought a new car, like, got a condo and everything, But that, like I said, the periods are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, that period lasted for a better part of 6 years, but by the end of that 6 years, like, it was bad. And again, I didn't get fired for drinking on the job, and I really wasn't drinking on the job, but I was sure shit stealing their liquor. Not because I didn't have the money to buy it, because, like, I didn't plan well. I was usually pretty good about planning my drinking, like I said before, but I wasn't planning well enough. So I was like, if this doesn't qualify me as an alcoholic, I don't know what would. So I would take bottles of A1 sauce and empty them out, right, and rinse them out. And then I fill them up with 151 from the liquor, because I got keys to everything. I'm an executive chef. I take what I want. But besides, don't you know who I am? Like, they owe me, right? I work hard for you people. Like, I don't think that I'm stealing. I can justify bad behavior. Today, I can justify bad behavior, right? And I stick it in my socks and wrap a piece of tape around it so I can smuggle it out. Just because I have to have it. I just have to have it. It's not a choice for me, And so eventually, I lose that job. And again, I'm down. It just, still not ready to do anything. I'm going to AA. After Father Martin's, I'd come to AA. When I first moved down here, I'd come to AA. I was going to Wilder most days, right? But I'm not doing anything. I sit on the side. I sit on the back. I don't talk to anybody. I come at the last minute, maybe late, because you might give me a reading, and I'm scared to death. I don't want to read anything. I don't want to talk to you. I'm just here so that my family isn't on my back, and so it looks like I'm doing something, right? But I'm still drinking. I was so sick, like I get dropped off for a meeting because I'd play games like, because I end up hanging out at my parents' place, right? Because they're so worried about it. So, well, why don't you come stay with us and we'll keep an eye on you, know? And I had some good enablers, really good enablers. And I would say, you got to drop me off early. You got to drop me off at 7 o'clock for the 7:30 meeting because I got to help set up. And they drop me off and leave, and I'd run down to the Exxon station and buy a bottle of Wild Irish Rose or something, drink it in the woods, and then go to the meeting. Like, you know, that's how I practiced AA in the beginning. And even when things would get bad, I'd go to detox. I'd get a couple of months. I'd get a sponsor and not use them. I read with them, but I'm not paying attention. I'm just there. Right? I'm not in AA. I'm around AA. I'm just playing games with it, in and out, in and out, in and out. And you know, finally things got so bad, like I said, health-wise, whatever. I'm unemployable. You know, I was doing what I call mercenary work. I go over to Forest Creek and just cook for them. Like, I need some help, I'll just cook for them, and then I'll move on. I work at the soup joint over by the barber shop in Southern Pines for, you know, I'm just, because they don't care if I drink, right? And it finally, I was out of Forest Creek and it got bad, and I was drinking on the job. I don't get drunk when I drink on the job. I just drink enough so that I don't cut my hands off. You know, I got to work with a knife. My hands will shake so bad that I have to. And I finally realized one day, I don't know if something happened, I had a moment of clarity, whatever you want to call it. I was like, this has got to stop. I'm dying here, you know? And I just stopped working, and I went into the boss's office. I said, Nick, I said, you know I'm drinking airline bottles of vodka in your bathroom, right? He said, what? I said, I got to get some help. You know, and I knew about this treatment center around here. The two sponsors that I had been through and not used yet had told me about this place, and that I probably should go. No, I don't need that. I'll just come to these meetings and not do anything, right? And I'm just going to get it through osmosis, hanging around you good people, right? So I finally went to treatment, and I was supposed to go on a Monday, and I don't know if anybody remembers old Brent Gordon. He's passed now, so I'll mention his name. And Brent was a big part of my sobriety. You know, he was. And so he was friends with a guy over at this treatment center, and so they got me in there, and then I blew it off. Like, I didn't show. And Brent called me up, boy, and he let me have it. Cursed me up one side and down the other. And I pulled the strings for you, you SOB, you do this. And I deserved it. You know, so I went the following week. And I did the 28 days, and I believe I did it to the best of my ability. I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to do, you know. And I was drunk 3 weeks after I got out of there. And, you know, I went to a recovery home. And I don't know. I just wasn't willing, I guess. I don't know. I just didn't. That's what the truth is. I just didn't. And they took pity on me and brought me back in there. And they got a spare room there, and they said, you know what, we're just going to keep you here for a while. You just work around here and you stay here for a while. And I said, I didn't have really any other options at that point, so I did. I stayed with the guy who was the cook there, and ended up putting 11 months together, you know. And during that 11 months, you know, I was doing stuff. I went through the steps, and, you know, I had a sponsor, and I was kind of using them and whatever, but somewhere I had this reservation deep inside me, like I knew I was going to drink again. I just didn't know when. You know, I just always had that in the back of my mind, like, I'm going to drink again. I don't know. I just knew it. So during that time, my dad got terminal cancer, you know, and he ended up going down to Savannah to stay with my brother, or near my brother, for hospice so that he could be around his new grandson. And so I was going down there and coming back up here and going down there, and I was staying sober, and I was being responsible. You know, I was trying to be a good son for my dying father and my grieving mother, right? And thank God I held it together for that 11 months. You know, I held it together through his death, and I was there, you know, and I helped arrange. My brother took care of the financial stuff, and I'm cleaned out their house here, and, you know, I made the funeral arrangements up here at Bowles and, like, everything. I'm doing everything I'm supposed to, but here's what I'm not doing, like, my sponsor's asking me, how you doing? I'm good. I'm fine. You know, I wasn't. You know, I'm not doing service work. I'm coming to some meetings, but I'm not really doing any service work. I'm not sponsoring. At 11 months, I'm not sponsoring anybody. right? Well, what does it tell us in the big book? It tells me nothing will, I always butcher when I try and quote, but nothing will, insures us against a drink more than rigorous work with another alcoholic, or however it's worded. Like, I'm not doing that stuff, right? I'm hanging around again. And so I take care of all that business and whatever, and then one day I find myself, I'm sitting in that house. I still got my condo out at Highland Hills. I remember Tim was living out there then. And but I'm staying in their house, and I got my dad's dogs, and I decided to get rid of the condo and move my stuff into the house for the meantime. And I remember a couple guys from AA were helping me move stuff, and Ryan looked at me, and he looked around the empty house. I'd cleaned everything, I'd rolled a dumpster up there and thrown everything out that needed to be thrown out, gotten rid of all the furniture. So it's like, and it's like a 6,000 square foot house on a golf course. It's like me and 2 dogs in it. And Ryan looked around there and said, "Man, you're going to drink yourself to death in this house." I said, "No, I ain't gonna. I'll be fine." I wasn't fine. You know, once I got done with all that stuff, all those responsibilities that I had to take care of, and I'm forever grateful that God allowed me to do that, because the guilt that would have been on me if I drank during that period, I don't know if I would have survived. But you know, I drank again because I wasn't working a program. I just wasn't working a program, and it got bad real fast. In a matter of weeks, I was back to shaking and morning drinks and whatever. And you know, the book talks about the jumping off place, right? And I remember when I reached that place, I was sitting in that house at this little table with a chair, and I'm sitting there with a TV on the wall and the rest of the big old living room, and I got a bottle here and I got a pistol here, and I'm saying, what am I going to do, you know? And I looked down, and those dogs looked at me, and I was like, what am I going to do with what's going to happen to the dogs, you know? So I picked up the phone and I called a friend of mine at that treatment center, and they had pity on me. They almost didn't, you know. They're like, long-term treatment. We've done all we're going to do for you. Like, you just won't. You're not willing. Like, what else do you want us to do for you? They're like, we think you should go over the mountains for like 18 months or 2 years, like long-term treatment. And I'm like, well, damn, I'm good. I know what that is. That's a work camp over there. I don't want to go over there. And they said, well, we're going to pray about it, and you come back to treatment, and we'll decide it when you get here. And I went back. I went to detox, and a couple guys from this program picked me up and took me to detox. Neither one of them is sober today, by the way, unfortunately. Which, you know, and those guys were active, you know. They came and visited me on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Like, they took me on the 23rd. They were there 24th and 25th to visit me and check on me. Like, they were doing the deal. But at some point they stopped, right? And they're out there today. They're alive, thank God. Anyway, they took me back into the treatment center for a 12-day quick dip, and they're like, well, we made a decision. You can go to long-term treatment, or you can go to this recovery home and done. And I knew, I'd been around that treatment center long enough to know what done was. So done it's not there anymore, unfortunately, because the lady who ran it passed away this past year. But it was where the guys went that were the hard cases that they didn't want to keep locally because they were a pain in the ass or whatever it is. So I'm like, I'm that guy now, right? But here's the thing, like, I'm the guy that has to be all out of options. And at this point, I got no money. I got a car that's paid for, right? I got some furniture sitting back in mom and dad's house that's on the market or whatever. And I just got nothing else. I got nothing. And it was at that point, like, I came to this realization that, you know, things are going to be different. They're never going to be like they were, no matter what. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be, but I have faith that it's going to be all right. You know, I've been hearing those things all along, like, just do AA, trust the process, all these little sayings and stuff, and I was like, this sounds like a lot of bullcrap to me. You know, I cringe, it's cheesy and whatever. Like, I know today every one of them is true. Everything they told me was, nobody ever lied to me in AA. Everything they told me that was going to happen bad happened, and everything good they told me was going to happen if I did what they said. I just wanted to do it my own way. Like, I looked at the steps and I'd be like, you know, oh, that looks good. Okay, I'll do that one. No, I don't think I want to, because who wants to admit all the stuff they did? Like, I don't want to do that stuff. There's no way. Like, I just didn't think it's necessary. What does that have to do? What does all this spiritual stuff and all this service work, what does this have to do with not drinking? Like, I know today it has everything to do with not drinking, because drinking is not my problem. I am my problem. My thinking is my problem. My lack of faith. I was born with a God-sized hole in me, and I've tried filling it with everything: money, women, cars, jobs, career, whatever it may be. Liquor's what kept me alive, I believe. I had a friend of mine over in Dunn said, I heard him share at a meeting one time, he said, I think if it wasn't for alcohol, I'd have blown my brains out. And I think that's true. And even with alcohol, I almost blew my brains out. So I finally got that willingness, And so I went over there to Dunn, and for the first time, I made sobriety a priority, right? I took a job in this crappy little steakhouse. I couldn't work at night. I could only work in the days, which was great. There was a bar in that restaurant, There was alcohol around. Didn't really bother me that much. And I took this menial job making less money than I made before I went to culinary school, to be honest. It was minimum wage, but it wasn't like $11 an hour, prepping salads and stuff, And my ego don't like that, right? Don't you know who I am? But you know what? That's what I needed, a good lesson in humility, right? And that's what my sponsors were telling me. Just get a job. Your rent is low. You're in a halfway house. Just pay your damn bills. Go to meetings. Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. And that's what I did. And what I know is all those other years that I was coming around here, what I never experienced was the removal of the obsession to drink, right? The obsession never left me. It was always there. It was always, So one day I'm at that job, and one of my knives went missing, and I'm throwing a hissy fit, which is my way. Where's my knife? And I asked somebody, I'm like, bartenders. The bartenders took it to cut fruit, And I went out to the bar, and I went in this cabinet, and I'm looking in there, and I didn't find my knife, but that's not the point. So I go back to the halfway house that night, and we're sitting there at dinner, and I'm eating, and all of a sudden I had this thought. I go in this cabinet, and it was full of liquor. Just all bottles of every kind of liquor you can imagine. And it never occurred to me during that I wanted any of it, nor was I afraid of it, right? Like that part in the book where it talks about, they say, recoil from it like a flame. Well, I knew what that was when I was trying not to drink. This was that new thing, like this place of neutrality. It didn't bother me. I was like, oh, this is what they talk about when they say the obsession is removed. And that was like an aha moment for me, And now that I've been sober for a little while, I start to see God. Everywhere, and I continue to this day. I always like the expression came to believe, right? I had to get here, I had to get sober, get my head clear a little bit. My head still isn't clear, I don't think, and I'm going on 8 years, and I still have some people don't want to know what I think half the time, I'm sure, but I see that God was always there. I just didn't know it was the solution, because hell, I used it as an excuse. When I first saw God in AA, I was like, oh, they're trying to make me into a Bible, something like. The truth is, I just wanted to drink. That was a good excuse so I could keep drinking. I'm an alcoholic. I want to drink, right? Today, I have some spirituality. I'm not a big church goer or whatever, but I know without God, I'm a dead man, for sure. The only reason I'm standing up here and sober today is because I had some willingness. I had some good people around me who cared enough about me to save my life, even when I was being a jackass. Guys like Brent, right, who gave me what I needed to hear. It's funny, when I saw him the first time I got out of treatment, I saw him at Wilder, and he's like, I owe you an amends. I shouldn't have talked to you that. And I was like, nah, brother. That's exactly what I needed to hear. If I'm looking, you got to hit me on the head with a hammer to get me to see the light, right? Because I think I know everything. I'm going to do it my way, and my way is what got me here. So, what's it like today? So today, that treatment center that wanted to send me away and told me they were done with me. I went, after I got out of that recovery home, I lived in Fayetteville for 5 years, and during the pandemic, the restaurants all closed, and I went and took a job in a grocery store. And glad I did, just another man on the bus, as Donnie used to say, right? Another grain of sand on the beach, and it's freeing, right? I'm not responsible for other employees. I just got to do my job, do AA, and I finally had some peace in my life. And hell, that's all I ever wanted in the first place. That's what I was searching for the whole time, was just some peace and contentment, and I never had it. If I'm chasing things, whatever it may be, I usually end up miserable. For me taking my will back manifests itself in the chasing of something as a rule, right? So Anyway, I took that job. One day that treatment center, I got a phone call and they said, how do you like working the food line? And I said, yeah, it's all right. And they said, well, Ron's retiring. How'd you like to come over and take over the food service here, And I was like, because I've been around long enough to know that working in the recovery industry is a dangerous proposition, right? A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that that's their sobriety, and it's not. Like, I'm very careful that I go to a lot of meetings. I still go to 5 meetings a week. And I like it. I go because I like it. I come here sometimes, but I usually go to Seven Lakes on Mondays. So they asked me, and I don't know, but I sat down with my sponsor and I hashed it out and whatever. And so, long story short, that treatment center that was ready to kick me to the curb hired me to work there. And I work there today, right? And I don't make a lot of money. I'm not an executive chef anymore, working at a 3-star, 4-star restaurant or a hotel or whatever, and I've never had as much peace as I got today, right? I've had the stuff, and when I get it, I'm like, yeah, well, I got the shiny thing, now what, right? What am I missing? I'm missing the spiritual connection. What's my purpose? My purpose today, I believe, is to be of service to God and to others, and that's why I come and do this stuff. And when somebody asks me to do it, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what excuse can I give them to not do it? Because I'm selfish and lazy. To the core, underneath it all, as an alcoholic, that's what I am. But then I know what the consequence is when I do that stuff. And I also know the benefit and how good when I leave here tonight, I'll feel good. Better than I did when I got here. If I'd blown it off, guilt and remorse and shame, because I know if I want to feel good, I got to do good. Right? And when I do bad things, I feel bad. And I don't feel bad for too long before I'm looking for a solution. And an alcoholic brain like mine tells me the solution's in a bottle. So I got to stay ahead of this thing. Right? And that's why I come here. I got a sponsor. I sponsor people. My sponsees sponsor people. Right? That's what this thing's all about. I can trace my sponsorship line back 4 generations before me and 4 generations after me. That's amazing. 9 levels of this thing. That's what this is all about. So, about out of time, there's one thing lately I've been doing. I read this the other night. So, we say the Serenity Prayer at every meeting, right? But what I got into lately is, when I was in treatment the second time for punishment, counselor there he's like, I want you to learn the full Serenity Prayer. I said, I know the full Serenity Prayer. He said, no, you don't. And he gave me a book. He said, go find the Serenity Prayer. So I know a lot of you know this, but maybe some new people don't. So what we read is only not even half of the Serenity Prayer, right? There's a whole second part, and I really like the second part because it's a set of instructions for a guy like me. Right? So I'm going to read it real quick. So where it ends with, and wisdom to know the difference, actually it is a comma, right? And it goes on to say, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Right, and that's all I ever wanted was reasonably happy, right? I'm not happy all the time. Happy, joyous, and free? Nah, I don't think so. Like, we have our moments. This thing, life is life, right? It's like this. That little phrase, reasonably happy. That's great. I'm good with that. Little contentment and peace most of the time. Hell, man, that's a blessing, So I thank Alcoholics Anonymous. I thank all of you. I thank God. And I appreciate Freddie asking me to do this. Thanks.